We're recording.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yasmine. Welcome to the Still Between. Oh,
Wow,
whoops.
that was
wrong.
really
Let me try
bad.
again.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Still Between. My name is Yasmine,
My name is Ahmed.
and we're excited to be here on a Monday morning.
Uh-huh.
How was our weekend, Ahmed?
Good. What did we do? We hosted a nice little event.
More people than we've ever had in our house before. That was really
A
cool.
lot of people.
At least in Pittsburgh. Do we have that many people in our house in North Carolina? We might have at some point.
Yeah,
Probably not. That
Yeah.
house is pretty small,
No, we did.
including like the outdoors and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've had that many people at our personal house before, because in North Carolina, big events we just have outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a good time.
Yeah, it was really lovely. Some of the Syrian community here in Pittsburgh wanted a space to do an event to kind of like educate about what's going on and to tell their stories. So we didn't really organize it at all, but it was really lovely to like hold space.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just cool having that many people in our house. Frankly, it's like very cold and dreary here, and it really like was just nice to like meet people and be in community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We saw Nosferatu yesterday,
We did. What were your thoughts?
which is great. It's a really good, like I said, cautionary tale about. Well, actually, you tell me. Do you think the downfall of society came about because of the female orgasm, or because Eastern Europeans were permitted to acquire real estate?
And immigrate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very Victorian story. It's definitely fun to see how powerful and threatening the female body and desire is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
was
really
fun.
beautiful, but like the romance aspect of this guy grooming this woman since she was, a little girl was beautiful. Just a really lovely.
He's joking.
Did it remind you of what was that book that everyone likes, Lolita?
Lolita? No, Lolita actually is like a wonderful book.
That's all women say that.
They don't.
Uh-huh.
They should. Well, I think it's a shit story in that it's like really upsetting, but I think it is a really powerful story about like just people's base desires to dominate others and like use them for their own gain.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think it is. I also think it's like shitty, but I think for a lot of like women who grow up feeling really overly sexualized in different ways, like it just resonates a lot to be like, this is obviously an extreme version, but like how much like young girls are kind of trained to like think of themselves as sexual objects and not as like children or as like full people. So I actually really like that book.
Why is it that all women like that book?
I think it's for that reason. I think a lot of women I've talked to who like it reminds them of like, of like experiences of as being kids and kind of being told that they were like sexual, before they knew what that meant. And also just like the weird ways that people like want to like try and find power in fucked up systems. Like, from the vantage, I mean, it's told from the vantage point of the abuser, but you kind of see these kind of breakthrough moments where like this little girl is trying to like create power within this fucked up situation.
Yeah.
I don't think all women like Lolita. I don't think that's true.
Everyone?
I mean, it's also a major red flag, I feel like. So I feel like if a man were to say I like Lolita, I'd be like, ah. But
That's fair.
I mean, it's not really a red flag. If you like other Nabokov works, which I love Nabokov in general, he was such a, he wrote like brilliant works in like Russian and English and French, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Men like Leon the Professional.
What's that?
It's a movie.
About what?
A guy who protects a young woman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
I think it's one of the first movies that Natalie Portman was in.
Okay.
I think it's her.
I will say Lolita's like not one of my favorite books ever, but I do like it. I think it's a good book.
Okay.
Yeah. I think also there's a little bit maybe of like feels like kind of like edgy when you're young and you read it,
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, and this is not a spoiler.
Uh-huh. Well, I think everyone knows the story of Dracula.
But you do get to see Dracula's penis.
You do.
And it's like the first time. I think it's kind of historical and revolutionary for that.
Oh, is it? Do they not normally show Dracula's penis?
I've never seen Dracula's penis.
I haven't either. It looks,
Okay.
Look like a guy. Yeah, I thought it was fun. Like the movie was fun. It was kind of campy. It was really beautifully shot. It was very Victorian. I think I expected it to be like a little bit more special, just based on all the buzz around it. Like if you know the story of Dracula, like there's no like plot spoilers. It's not
But
like
the
innovative or interesting.
Well, no, that's the thing. It's a remake, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's interesting. It's an exciting thing. I think it's just a lot of to be honest, it feels like a lot of like film bros like me who are just into
Didn't know you self-identified as a film
Robert
bro.
Eggers. Well, no, I don't, because I don't really like see myself as an expert on like what's good or bad. I just know whether or not I had a good time. And but I do like Robert Eggers a lot, and I like everything that he's done that I've seen.
Remember when you tried to tell me I didn't like him, even though that wasn't true?
No, I don't remember that.
You
at
were
all.
like, "Oh, you don't like him. You won't like this movie."
Well, you don't. Yeah, you didn't like The Northman.
Yeah,
You
I
didn't
hated that, but I
like,
loved The Lighthouse, which I was so surprised you didn't remember.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anything else we got up to this weekend?
No, that was pretty much it.
Oh, we're watching a really great show called Severance that I'm obsessed with. That's like the best show I've seen in a while that you introduced me to.
It's been out for a while.
I'd never heard of it.
But then I kind of, I don't know. I was hesitant to watch it for a while, and then I finally got into it because I'm unemployed. And yeah, it's actually really good.
It's the best show I've seen in a bit. I think the last show I liked this much was probably Fallout.
Yeah, don't point the microphone away from your mouth.
But yeah, I haven't even heard about it. I guess there's just so many shows lately.
Yeah. I was skeptical because usually a show that is, built on just like a singular premise, which is like, oh, what if your work life and your life were separate? It just like falls on that too much, and they don't really build like a world around it. I don't know, is what I found from past TV shows like that. But this, like, they actually really explore it a lot, and like the implications of like what if you were to separate all this out, and in like really novel, interesting ways. And I feel like I'm watching like a Russian novel when we're watching that. So
yeah, no, I agree. I feel like sometimes there can be stuff that's kind of like sci-fi or like dystopian or futuristic just for the sake of it, but this actually has like a very human element, and like it's also very surreal and just like fun to play with.
Yeah.
And also like a lot of suspense too. Like yeah. Anyway, I would highly recommend.
I really the thing that I found most interesting is just how, like, I wouldn't have thought to incorporate like religion into the like the work people, for lack of a better word for them.
In terms of like the sort of glorification of the corporate structure in a way that's kind of religious.
Well, yeah, the only thing that they have to reference in that term is like the handbook.
Right. So they're always, yeah, you're right. It almost is kind of like a biblical text or like a Quran.
They're constantly quoting the handbook. Like even when the guy brings him like the tote bags, he's like, oh, they're handbook totes, right? Like they're just, because that's like the only book that they could think of.
Yeah.
But they also have all this weird mythology around the other departments, right? Like it's like, oh, back in the day, MDR did this coup and like 8 people, and then they believe like really weird things about each other, like it's
like a divide and conquer kind of strategy.
Pouches. Yeah. So anyway, it's funny and it's good.
Yeah, no, you're right. It definitely is kind of like it's taken to an nth degree, like how much people will kind of like worship or spiritualize like progress at work, like all the kind of like get ahead, self-help kind of books. But in this premise, like it's literally all these characters know, so it's like non-ironic, which makes it really funny as a viewer.
Yeah.
When they say things like, what's the name of the CEO again?
It's like
Edgar
Kier.
Yeah, I'll be like, thanks to Kier, like instead of like praise to God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I was gonna say really quickly,
else?
one thing I love about the show is that this kind of idea that even though they have literally no recollection of their like alive selves, that in some way it kind of imprints on their body, like it's something beyond memory. So like they sometimes will feel like empty or sad, but they don't know why. I mean, part of it is because they're trapped in like a work hell, but there is some idea of like memory living beyond memory, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What do we got for today? I've got a couple of news items, but
I've got one main article and like one news thing. What would be best to start with? Maybe the articles? Or rather the news items?
Yeah, you start with your news item.
Okay. I just want to talk about the Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk debate. I mean, I think the HB1 visa thing is complicated and a lot of the discourse is getting kind of flattened. But the main thing that I found like in a more humorous light to be just kind of really, really funny is how much everyone's talking about Desis. People never talk about Desis on this kind of national level for the sustained amount of time.
Yeah.
I've never even heard the term Desi in like national news discourse, which, is just like South Asian, so like Indian, Pakistani, Nepali, Bangladeshi. Sometimes people include Afghanistan. Um, but yeah, I think Vivek Ramaswamy was basically kind of talking about like, so Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk are going to lead allegedly this new stupid thing called Doge, which is just like based on Elon, like the name is just based on Elon Musk's stupid Bitcoin.
Right. It's the Department of Governmental Efficiency.
Nice. I'm impressed you remembered the acronym.
It features, well, I wrote about it in my last Substack article.
You did, yeah.
Check it out if you have time to kill.
Definitely. Well, not just that, but yeah. Yeah, so I guess Vivek, what else has Vivek done before this? I'm trying to remember.
He was the CEO of some scammy-ish company, like pharmaceutical company, I think.
Okay.
But
has he like worked in government before?
I think they essentially bought a drug or something and then like privatized it and then sold it for a lot more money than what they acquired it for. But anyway, something like that. I don't remember exactly.
Gotcha. And he's kind of like weirdly rose into prominence with Trump.
Yeah.
And he's Republican.
Well, he ran, because he ran for the nomination.
Oh my God, I totally blanked out on that. You're right, he did. Like a while ago.
This is like 2 months ago.
He ran against Trump? This round?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
He ran in the primary.
I didn't even remember that.
Because they weren't sure if if Trump was going to be allowed to be president. But essentially, he was saying he was running so that he could take votes away from some of the other anti-Trump Republicans.
Weird.
And then give them to Trump. He always, I think, pretty much was saying he was going to drop out and like
endorse Trump. Ultimately.
Give his fealty to Trump.
I like blanked out on that. I remember Nikki Haley running. I don't really remember Vivek running.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was brown on brown violence.
That is messed up, man. Maybe that's why I just kind of mentally eliminated one of them.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe that's why. It was too traumatic for you.
Yeah. But I was going to say is that part of this like HP1 kind of discourse and conversation, so Vivek and Elon are for it, and a lot of the MAGA people are like, hey, this is not cool. Like, you're taking American jobs. We thought that you were for us. But Vivek is like talking about like basically how Americans don't know how to raise their families and like how like the reason that we need South Asian workers are because they're like values based and they're hard workers, and he kind of raises his children in a certain way. And it was really interesting to see that conversation kind of play out on a national scale. I think the main thing that's interesting, and I'm not the first person to point this out, is like the way he's talking about white Americans is the way that a lot of white Americans talk about people of color. Yeah. And so it was just like funny to see that flipped. Like, oh, doesn't it feel bad when someone's doing it to you? And they're like, well, you just have bad values and like you don't know how to raise your children properly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was just kind of amusing. But then like, I don't know, I was thinking about it. I really think it's mostly a class thing. I don't think it's actually like a values or cultural based distinction thing. It's like, oh, who has the time to like get their kids into specialized programs and work with them at home? Like I think across racial lines, it comes to people who have more resources, right? Like, I don't think it's so much of a cultural thing. Having said that, and I want to say this really carefully, I do think there's something about some communities that is kind of like collective, that is helpful, that, of course, like some white American, and like, right, what is white America? Like, that's like a huge generalization, right? There are so many people from so many different backgrounds, like not just class, but like huge Irish, Catholic, and Italian communities, right? Like, there's lots of different, like, I don't want to paint with a broad brush here. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like this kind of idea that's been mythologized for a lot of Americans of like the insular nuclear family, as opposed to like a large community-based family where you feel like beholden to like a lot of stakeholders. It's not just your individualistic dream. I don't know if Vivek was bringing it that far, but I do think there's something to that is kind of lovely, and it sort of like kind of tempers American individualism and just like do what you want, like kind of, do you get what I'm saying? I don't know. It just kind of made me think a little bit. You don't know. You're saying no. I guess, well, I don't know. Let me get my thoughts together. What did you think about Vivek's anti-American rant, essentially?
I think it's just exactly what someone would expect, right? Like a lot of these people who voted for Trump did so because they see him as this populist figure. And like, yeah, as much as we like critique the Democratic base and stuff on here, like I think it's worth just being like, these guys are idiots as well. Like,
of course,
they're so
obviously.
stupid. I don't think we say that enough. Like, these supporters are just like so wound up, and a lot of people try to make it seem like, oh, this is just like the white working class and like they're finally fighting back or whatever. It's like, no, these are like exactly the lumpen proletariat that like Marx would talk about. They're like people who are, I guess, ostensibly of like some working class status, but it's just like really ultimately this is not a democratic or populist party. Like this is a party of oligarchs, and they're gonna act exactly in the interest of oligarchs. So it's like, why the fuck are we surprised when they suddenly are like, oh, what's the best source of cheap labor that we can get? And it's, you know, both a mixture of highly educated and uneducated, you know, people from abroad who, you know, some of them will give H1B visas to if they are educated, and then others, you know, we say we hate illegal immigration, but then, you know, we'll essentially use them as slave labor on like farms and stuff. It's like this has always been in the interest of these oligarchs because labor is not only like their biggest expense, but it's also their biggest threat to their status. And so I hope people realize that. And I think calling that out, one of the responses that I've seen from people who are supposedly like left, they're like, you're taking an anti-immigrant approach. And it's not anti-immigrant to say capitalists are finding a way to take advantage of the global poor that a global capitalist system has created.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's not so much for the HB1 visas specifically. It's like it's the kind of stratification of wealth globally, like you said, right? But it's not so much like the poorest of people in India or Pakistan, because those people wouldn't have had the resources to get to university and become engineers. But it is like, oh, relative to like global wealth and the power of the dollar, they can make more here, but be paid less maybe than like someone who's American born and went to university, and they can send that money back home often. Yeah. So it's.
But there is also a cultural difference. I do think some of these other places, like the culture of work is a lot more amenable to a capitalist here. Yeah, like people are like, oh, you should come and work hard, and like work should be your like the thing that you derive satisfaction from, etc., right? Whereas like the American worker is a little bit more whatever American mean. I'm using these terms like very loosely. I'm not like meaning to say like white and non-white. I'm just saying like people who are of mostly in American culture are finding that it's not as satisfying. Like you want more of a work-life balance. People want to be able to work remotely, and I feel like we're in a period where when like bosses and managers are really trying to discipline the labor force here.
Yeah. And there's also the irony of like, and again, this is painting with a very broad brush, so I'm not talking about like individual people, and I know not everyone fits this narrative, but again, a lot of these South Asian workers who are coming to the US and who are like perhaps working more hours and more fervently than, I mean, frankly, because they're less protected, right, while they're on this visa, come from backgrounds that are themselves highly exploitative within their home countries, right? Like that, like the entire economy is run on fucking servant labor. So it's, yeah, I mean, I don't want to make it like it's complicated on multiple levels. It's not as if they're like the suppressed class in their home country.
No.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly not the story for like my family, for example, which is like upper class Pakistani. And that is a huge transition for a lot of people who immigrate here.
You have to point the microphone at your mouth.
Oh, okay. I thought you were just going to talk louder.
No.
Yeah, but you just shouting me.
Yeah. Sorry, but you gotta, and you have to not wave it around like this when you talk.
Okay. Yeah, the other thing, I don't know. I have to like research this more and think about it more because I do think there is something to, I mean, look, I think we're living through the end of American empire, so maybe this won't be true much longer, but there is something to kind of like, is it slightly exploitative and symptomatic of the way that global capital operates and like brain drain? Yes. But from an American standpoint, there is something valuable about being a country that can attract new ideas and new people. And like, ultimately, I think it should be a pathway to immigration, right? It shouldn't be like you're stuck here. Like, I mean, there have been people, I don't know about like in my family who have like had HB1 visas, right? And who became citizens. So, and I'm grateful for that, you know, and I mean, often another pathway is like student visas. And then after that, you get sponsored for an HB1 visa because you want to stay in this country. So it is like it is a multifaceted thing. And I think that it seems also as if the exploitation of HB1 visa workers has gotten worse in recent years. I don't know if it's just that I wasn't aware of it earlier, but I think especially like because the future of American empire is kind of precarious. There is this like nervousness, like people are afraid to leave the country, that they won't be able to get back in, or like laws will change on them. So I think in that precarity, like working standards have gotten worse for a lot of people. But I wanted to kind of circle back to actually, just staying with that for a second. It is objectively, though, kind of messed up that, like, there is that brain drain, right? Like, ideally, I guess, people would be able to stay in their place of origin with their families if they wanted to and not have to leave in order to, like, make money. And, like, whole economies globally are basically, like, what's the word for this again? When you send money back home, what's, like, the formal word for that?
I don't know.
Oh, there is a formal term, but I'm blanking on it.
Stealing from the white man?
Redistribution? No, there's a formal term. But like whole economies in the global south are, you know, propped up by that. And so like what would it look like to restructure that? I don't even know. But kind of going back to the cultural argument, and maybe this is like not quite in line with what Vivek was saying, but I guess I loathe to agree with him. I don't agree with most of what he's saying. I think what he's actually meaning to talk about is kind of class-based resources and not like, oh, some people just are better wired to educate their children. But I think I grew up hearing so much of like, especially I feel like a little bit as like half of my family being immigrants, you kind of hear this sort of like ideal of like, oh, like this is what it will look like when they assimilate. You know what I mean? And like, this is what it will look like for them to do that properly. And so it is kind of interesting to hear like, oh, there are other kind of narratives of what the ideal family should look like that are not the American nuclear family, and that are not this kind of idea of like unchecked individualism, and that kind of involve like expectation, and that's not always bad. Like obviously that can also be bad, right? If it's like I pick my child's career for them and I like, you know, they can only be doctor, engineer, lawyer. I don't think that's healthy. But I think like, I don't know. I feel like my whole life kind of growing up, I thought that this sort of like idea of like the immigrant mentality was a little bit vilified and like, oh, they're just still Americanizing. And I feel like there is something to that stereotyped version of a family that is kind of working as a unit to kind of, I guess the thing that I think is beautiful about it is that it's an extended idea of what it means to succeed, right? It's like not an individualistic idea. Is this making sense? I think this is kind of beyond.
You think this is what Vivek was saying?
I think you're right that this is not really what Vivek was getting at.
Okay.
But in him kind of taking a moment to kind of be a little Desi supremacist, I thought there was something interesting in kind of like a narrative that is not just glorifying the American nuclear family middle class as like the model that all Americans should aspire to. Does that make sense?
So, okay, what are you saying that he is advocating for?
Oh, I don't like what he's advocating for.
Because from what I see is that he's just advocating for a more extreme version of the thing that deteriorated the American nuclear family. Like, again, what they want is just more people coming here so that they can help reconcentrate as much wealth as possible in the hands of an oligarchic elite. Like they want cheaper labor that is then going to suck more money up into fewer hands. And then that's what leads to the deterioration of people's abilities to like raise dynamic families that aren't just units that you see as like a way to protect yourself around from a hostile world, right? Like I think what you're saying is that we should take a moment to actually collectively like reconceptualize what it means to be a family, and that should mean something beyond like you know, you as an individual, or like raising people with values that are beyond the individual, right? Like in part of a collective. But the thing that does that, the thing that makes people see themselves as like this hardened unit against like and in competition with the rest of the world and like not really have pro-social values is like scarcity.
I think there's two separate things here. Like I totally agree with you that like yes, like ultimately what Vivek wants is just to kind of remain an elite, and this is like an economic mechanism by which you can do that. Like I think that's a good diagnosis, and I think you also did a really good job, and I appreciate how you connected to that, to how that actually leads to like people feeling like hardened individuals and not having like a social safety net. I guess the thing I'm just trying to call out is more of like a cultural argument that I think Vivek is making, which is also a fucked up one, but that's the part that I found something vaguely interesting about. He basically was saying like the reasons why I need to like import people from abroad from like South Asia is because like these Americans like don't have good values.
Right.
They don't work hard. They don't know how to educate their children. They
Yes.
don't know how to instill like you know, like they're not sending their kids to Kumon. They're not sending their kids to these after school programs.
Yeah.
They don't operate their family units in a way in which they collectively think about how they can get ahead.
Yeah.
They kick their kids out when they're 18. And all of this is really awful, shame-based, like stereotyping. But one, and I've already said this, so I won't harp on this, but it was kind of funny, just like frankly, because it's a way that a lot of, I think he's talking mostly about white Americans, the majority of people in this country. And that's a way that they talk about everyone, which is funny.
I will say there's like a weird bait and switch here because like, yes, he's saying that there's a deficiency in like American culture that these other workers don't have. But I think what's really happening here is like white families that have money send their kids to all these programs.
Well, that's why I was saying that I think ultimately I agree. I think this is mostly actually a class-based thing.
Yeah.
Like 100%. Like the question of like, oh, who is getting the after-school programs is not a race one. It only is a race one insofar as in this country, race and class often intersect. It's a class-based one. Like if you come from an upper middle class family, you're getting these resources.
Now, if we take two like, you know, lower class families, right? Like if you take like a brown family and then a white family, like your typical white family, and say like, does the brown family like care more innately about like sending their kids to after school or making sure that they get tutoring or whatever?
I don't feel comfortable saying that. I don't think that's necessarily true because also like white America is the majority of this country, so like I don't even want to stereotype them. Like that means so many different people, you know, from so many different backgrounds. So basically, I think that everything he's saying is bullshit. The only thing I find vaguely interesting, which I don't think was his main point, is this idea of like the kind of American individualistic, like your kids are on their own when they're 18, like something about that is not like something that is necessarily ideal or the only way of doing things. Like I do find that vaguely interesting. I don't think that's his main project or point. I think he's just kind of an asshole, but yeah, I thought that was sort of interesting.
I mean, again, like the deficiency in culture is largely top down, right? Like I do agree that there is a deficiency in American culture. I think generally American cultural values are deteriorating because there are things that are just, you know, opportunities that are just taken away, right? Like you can't send your kids to like a daycare, like a good daycare. The schools are just like filled with teachers that are being underpaid and
right. So all of this
really
is ultimately
teach.
Class-based analysis, though, is because people don't have
After
enough money
school
or resources.
programs aren't paid for, right? Like they don't feed the kid. Like it's so if I'm someone who like is poor, right, and have to work like more than two jobs or like, you know, more than like 8 hours a day, right, and I have kids, my guess is I would love it if there were, you know, subsidized after school programming so that I could send my kids to those things.
Yeah.
Whether I'm white or brown.
100%.
It doesn't matter,
no,
right?
I totally agree with that.
If those opportunities existed, right, which costs money and like federal funding and state funding and all that, I'm sure you'd see some level of improvement in, you know, because through those things, like you have to interact with other people, like you get some sense that, you know, there are institutions that you need to think about that have like, you know, that affect your daily life or whatever. You just kind of become, I think, naturally like a more involved citizen, and you understand that all of this comes from some sort of like collective value, and that creates some sort of shared values and like some cultural values and all this stuff. Yeah, you would see like a better culture, I think,
100%.
would arise from that.
No, I totally agree with that.
But
I think
Vivek wants to say it's like, oh, it's because parents let their kids watch TV,
right,
and
which
because
is stupid.
they liked whatever the fuck Stefan more than Steve Urkel or whatever his post said.
I don't even remember that, but yeah. Okay, but so let's move away from Vivek. Just stick with me for a second because I'm just curious if this resonates with you. You might be too good of a Marxist.
Stop moving your mic around, but yeah.
Okay, you might be too good of a Marxist to think about this just like separated from economics, and maybe that's totally valid. But like when you were growing up, did you ever hear stuff about like just like what assimilation was supposed to look like? Like was that like a thing that was maybe it's because
I mean,
I'm
people
mixed,
just
but
say
like,
assimilation and then you're supposed to fill in the blanks.
Really? 'Cause I felt like there was like specific things that like you were supposed to do, and like this is what it was gonna look like, and this is how you were gonna change, like in order to become a good American. Like you were gonna, like your psyche was gonna somehow change. You didn't really hear? Did you not hear this kind of
No, no,
conversation?
I heard
Yeah.
assimilation as like a value of like, I mean, even in school when they taught like the great melting pot,
Right.
like they're like
Right.
immigrants need to assimilate, and I always, but they never said exactly what assimilation looks like. It's just you assume it's speaking English, and then like that's like generally being of the culture. But again, like that, yeah, there's not like a handbook for assimilation.
Yeah. There's not. But I guess the idea that it means to kind of like,
Don't wear anything too weird, you know?
yeah, like this idea that it means to totally kind of like change the way that you kind of like have your values and like kind of structure your family. Like, I don't know. Vivek is not the man for this, but I am glad that more broadly, like I'm kind of hearing more like young people from immigrant backgrounds not aspiring to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like not kind of seeking their validation in a thing that is totally like cut off from whatever kind of practices their family immigrated with. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Hmm.
Okay, I'll give you a concrete example. Oh, I have such mixed feelings about this, but I worked for a college access program, which I really loved, and I'm still in touch with my students, a few of them, and it was like some of the most meaningful work of my life. It was right after college, and I was so grateful to do it. But one thing that I've thought about that I kind of regret a little bit, I mean, I was like 22, but we had this kind of ethos of like it's really good for students to go away from home, like far away from home. Like
Mhm.
it is going to change their lives because our program was aimed at like first generation and like working class students, so they had to like their family had to make less than the like um they had to be like legally in poverty basically
Okay.
to be in the program.
Yep.
And part of like the idea behind that was like, oh, like they'll go far away for school, it'll broaden their horizons.
Mhm.
And like that can be true, and like I had students for whom that was really lovely and important. But even this idea of like you have to be far away from your community that you grew up with in order to be like a better person, I think it's kind of fucked up. Like, I mean, one, you could go to a competitive school closer to home if that's important to you. But like for a lot of our students, like it was really important to stay close to family, and that's not a bad thing. You know what I mean?
So you're saying that even if they stated that staying close to family was important to them, the objective of the organization
It
was to
wasn't
get
like
them
the
to.
objective of the organization, but the kind of idea was if they were a high achieving student, it would really benefit them to go to the most competitive school possible and to have an experience that was away from home. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's something about that that's a little bit like, oh, you have to break your ties to like, and I will say, I feel bad saying this because I actually really love this organization for the most part. And like, I'm making it sound like more of a strong ethos than it was this particular
Sure.
point. It wasn't like, our main point was to get our students into four-year schools. So it didn't matter where. And it was, we worked with them and we only like tried to get them into schools that they wanted to. Obviously we didn't like decide for them.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's like a small point, but there's something about that I feel like was a little bit off. Like,
I don't necessarily see that as bad. I think it's like some sort of balancing equation that's like not set for every person of like,
yeah,
because growing up poor below poverty line, I was just like, oh, it'd be great. Like people should be able to have geographic mobility,
it's
and
true.
often don't.
It's true.
And there's knowledge and like things that again, when you're 16, 17 saying like, oh no, I just want to stay here because that's important to me. It's like, what do you know? Like you might acquire different feelings if you go somewhere abroad, and you may just be repeating things that you've heard and you may not really believe them, but also you may totally believe them and you're like, I love this community, like and so you never know. And so you have to do this equation of like, well, it is important to stay in this community, but also like in the US, you should balance like how elite this university is, because that could also enable them
Future
to
mobility and
not
for
only
sure.
class mobility, but like geographic mobility.
No,
If they
you're
really
right.
want to go back and do something in their communities, they can.
You're
And
right.
then like,
yeah.
so
And like I will say,
I don't think it's bad.
my students who like went away, like all were happy and
Yeah.
like it was good for them.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm thinking about, I had a few students who I really was pushing to go away who didn't,
Yeah.
and I felt like, oh, it's a failure.
Mhm.
Like they could have had this experience, and like I don't know. I just feel like there's something about this kind of, because my students were, a lot of them were from immigrant backgrounds, and there was this kind of normative idea of like it wasn't said explicitly, but a little bit like, oh, like this is what they should want. But it's
Yeah.
like, and also I guess the other thing about that I found a little weird was like poor white kids from Oregon would have been just as afraid to go away from home. You know what I mean? But it almost felt a little bit like, well, these students, and I mean, it wasn't a race-based program. I had kids of all ethnic backgrounds, but I don't know what I'm really getting at here. But I think there is something, it's not like an even melting pot, but like, I feel like the idea that like Americans who are not part of minority communities can learn something from minority communities is positive.
Yeah.
And Vivek is not doing that, but like that idea I think is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
What is the answer with HB1 visas? Going back to the main issue, I really don't know. Like, I don't think that they should go away. I mean, I guess there should be better protections, obviously, and there should be like, you should be paid as much as American workers. But then also the weird thing about like Vivek and all these fucking Republicans is they're kind of like, and they're right, like the college system is broken, but then they're like, go to trade school, don't go to college. And then they're like, fuck, none of y'all are going to college. We got to import some workers, which is also kind of fucked up. Like, do you not believe in Americans that they could like get an engineering degree or get a tech degree or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the solution is to just better fund education, especially in areas where we anticipate the economy going.
But as long as there's a cheaper labor source, won't that be like tempting for American employers? Like, I guess there has to be like regulations so that like people from abroad are paid as much as American workers.
But if the idea is that we need to import these workers because American workers like can't compete in terms of like knowledge or whatever, I guess you're right? Like it's always going to be like there are going to be cheaper workers who would be willing to come here from somewhere else. I don't know. Maybe that they by law have to be part of a union. That way this is just like less attractive.
I feel like they should just have to be paid the same amount. Like that would be fair. Or it has to be like combined with a pathway to citizenship or something.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm sure there are like people who have been thinking about this for a while.
Yeah. I mean, because I really like to stop that kind of inequity, you would have to like restructure global capital almost to stop the like incentive of people to come here and get paid slightly less, either as a pathway to citizenship or to support their family at home or both.
Yeah. I think I have heard people saying like if you are a company that is hiring someone with an H1-B visa, you then should be on the hook for like the costs and like keeping them until they get their citizenship or something like that.
That sounds good.
That way you can't just like continually replace or turn over your workforce, or like there's some level of commitment that you have to make to the worker. And so that makes it a lot less of a dispensable like resource for makes it a lot less of like a plug and
right. No, that makes sense. If you think about even like you and I, like how we ended up here, like I don't know what visas my great-grandparents would have been on in the 1920s coming from Sweden, but I know they came here because there was like a famine in Sweden, and then my dad came here on a student visa and stayed, like obviously became a citizen. So like we are in on the very immediate products of immigration. Like I don't want to lose that as a country. Like, you know, I mean, I don't know. I guess if we were being realistic and not like rosy-eyed or whatever, is that the phrase? Rosy-eyed? Rosy, what is it?
Huh?
What's the phrase? Rosy-eyed? Rosy...
like rose-colored glasses?
Yeah. If you're not doing it, I was gonna say if I'm thinking about my own work and stuff, truthfully, when we've allowed for immigration, it's been because we need the labor. It's not actually out of like a sense of higher ideals. So I guess it doesn't really matter. But like, ideally, there would be a way for that to continue to happen, because like otherwise, you and I wouldn't be here. Like we haven't been here that. I mean, you really haven't been here very long. But like,
I've been here. What are you talking about?
Like you're the first generation. I mean, yeah.
You mean generationally?
Yeah.
I've been here most of my life.
I know, but since you were 6.
Yeah.
I've been inspired by MAGA talking points. I'm like, Ahmed, you haven't been here for long.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, like on my mom's side, we've been here since the 1920s, and on my dad's side, we've been here since my dad got here.
Congrats.
Okay, my point is that like, I don't want to lose that pathway for like people from different places to come here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's how we got here.
Right. That's a good point.
It doesn't feel profound to you?
I think the thing that concerns me is just that this is just happening on a global level.
But it always has
been. I think now with the way that I don't know, just like the pervasiveness of like
global companies.
global capital.
That's
It's just like
true.
creating this, again, it's a global working class, but they still want you to see it as like, this is the American working class, this is the Indian working class, and like they have different interests and like whatever. And I'm like, no, these people have the same interests, and they're now competing against each other because of like these.
Okay,
kind of
that is the thing I see a wrinkle in, though. I can't get over how much the people who are coming here from South Asia are not working class in their own countries, and how much they are.
No. You're talking. Yes, I
Yeah.
understand. Like not all H1B. I'm talking about
like
true global working poor. I'm
Yeah,
not saying like the
yeah.
H1B workers are
But
always.
that's the thing that's confusing is they do become working class in the U.S. sometimes, or at least they're not being paid as well as like their counterparts in the U.S., which is messed up. But like, and they're not individually responsible for coming from such highly individual, like exploitative economic systems. But yeah, like a lot of people who are genuinely working class in South Asia aren't able to make it here, because it's too far and because they're not getting sponsored for visas.
Yeah.
But
That's a good point.
yeah. Yeah. The kind of this is like a side note, but like that is kind of ironic too now that I'm thinking about it. Like Vivek and all these South Asians who are like, we just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Like a lot of those people come from places where like literally their entire family has like generational servants that like have like aided their ability to get through the world. I think a lot of Americans don't know how bad that is, and like most of like the global South, like it's really kind of icky.
I think they're actually probably wanting to go to that model where
like
where the people who can afford it here is just like you have a nanny, or it's like a slow shift from nanny to like au pair to like, oh, this is just our live-in servant.
I don't want to like collapse things that much. I think that like there's still a lot of protections. I mean, yeah, look, I think where that is more similar is thinking about like undocumented like farm workers. You know what I mean? Like that is kind of the class of people we're talking about, like in terms of like labor protections or lack of them. I had an au pair.
Au pair or servant? Does it just sound nicer because it's French?
Well, you know her. She's like my aunt. She's like a really close part of my family.
That's what that's what people say.
She's Swedish, y'all. She's doing fine. Okay. I love her dearly. But
no, she actually has like a social safety net to like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's the thing. It's like when you don't have that,
some
then
of her friends, it was just kind of a little bit up to luck. Some of her friends did have really shitty working conditions when she was like living with us.
Did they go back to Sweden?
Yeah, some of them only stayed for a year because they were like living in like just like one person was like living in a laundry room and just like uncomfortable stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So
but she was not.
Starts to sound a lot different when you don't say it in French anymore.
But I think the thing I want to say is like I do think like because people pay for labor in the US, I don't think a lot of people understand like just how crazy it is and how much it is kind of like a feudal.
You're too far away.
A kind of feudal system of indentured servitude in like some third world countries, like paying someone a living wage to do labor. Is not any more exploitative than anything else. Whereas like in some third world countries, like I mean this happens in the U.S. too, right? But like just because someone's performing domestic labor doesn't mean that that's necessarily bad if they're being fairly compensated, right? But there are like whole models where like that's just like people, there's no mobility whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah.
We can go back to the again when people are saying like, oh, you're against H1Bs or like you have some critique of this immigration program, so that you're anti-immigrant. It's like just go back to when Musk first acquired Twitter, and then a lot of people left because he was just like, yeah, you need to work at least 60 hours a week and like imposed all these really hard, stressful working conditions. And the only people who could not leave were H1B visa
that
immigrants.
Was crazy. You're right. They were literally trapped.
They were trapped. They had to sleep in fucking cots in the Twitter offices because he was just like working them so hard, and they like literally could not leave because otherwise they would just get deported.
Right.
So you tell me, is that what you want the H1B program to look like? If you're saying like, oh, you shouldn't actually critique this because that's anti-immigrant. Like, so you're saying we should bring these people over and just like let companies treat them however they want.
Right.
Like, that's insane.
Yeah. This kind of is like not such a neatly divided left-right issue, which makes it really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least as far as I can tell, right? Like, I feel like there's like a lot of different.
I feel like few things are, but then they just get talked about that way.
Really?
Yeah. Like even healthcare.
That's a good point,
Even,
actually.
you know,
You're right.
like a lot of yeah.
Yeah. Like
No.
just seeing how across the political spectrum, how many working class people like are supporting Luigi is kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was my news item.
Okay. Great. I've got 2. If I can get my laptop to work.
And then I've got the article.
All right. Actually, okay, speaking of kind of the rise of like the dumbest guy, you know, Andrew Tate is running for PM in Britain.
I miss the times where we could hear a headline like that and be like, well, obviously that won't happen, but you just never know now, man.
You actually that's the thing that is scary. Is
They're
like
very
this
surreal
is
times.
like with Musk and
Trump. I mean,
like it is just like a collection of just the dumbest guys who have managed to just attract audiences of like young boys and yeah, I hate to sound like a scold here, but just like not really well socialized young men, and they somehow have taken power. But anyway, so Andrew Tate is running for PM in Britain, and his party is called the Bruv. Have you heard of anything about this?
no. What is bruv? Like, is that meant to
Bruv.
mean like brother?
Hello, Bruv.
Aw.
You know how people say that?
Yeah. Is this kind of like Doge?
But
Is it
it's-
like a stupid
yes,
acronym?
yeah, yeah,
No.
It stands for
Why do they all love these?
It stands for Britain Restoring Underlying Values.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Well, it would be cool if Britain had a Muslim prime minister.
I mean, London already has a Muslim mayor.
Yeah. That's not quite the same thing as the whole country, though.
Yeah.
Of
hold on.
course, if it happens, it'll be like a fucking white convert as the first one. No, that's awful, though. Doesn't he also still have criminal charges against him? I mean, again, like read
Oh,
Trump.
sorry. Let me reply to this text real quick.
Okay.
And then I have a meeting with Susie at 10:15.
We'll wrap up by then. I gotta start working at 11, so that works out.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I hope this doesn't come to pass. He seems like an absolute idiot. I'm glad that some of the like Muslim manosphere mans have finally hopped off and are not supporting him as much.
So this is, I will say, again, this is kind of like a very online thing that I've seen. And again, it's mostly on X, which, you know, take that for what it's worth. But I think it is important to kind of like keep a finger on the pulse. Something that has been shared pretty like has been circulating like pretty widely among these like Andrew Tate, and even like has been retweeted by Elon Musk constantly over the last month or so, which kind of led to you know, why Tate is running for the PM role, is they are saying that just like immigrants are coming into the country and doing like widespread rape. And
Wait, Andrew Tate is promoting this too?
yeah,
What an asshole.
they're saying,
Jesus.
and at the same time they're saying like they're doing all this dog whistling stuff about like who, you know, anytime you hear about a crime like this, is like, why is it always the same group of people? And they never really say it's like it's this group of people, it's that.
It's like ... fill
Yeah,
it
they're
in.
like, you fill it in, but then they'll post a video of like a brown like immigrant, and you get like this like out of context clip, and you're just like, I don't really know what's going on, but it seems like you're saying this guy's doing the rape. And like there have been apparently all these like knife crimes, which I think is hilarious, like because
Why,
they're
'cause
like
they don't have good old American guns.
exactly, because they're just, I'm just like, come on, grow up, like, dude, knife crimes.
We'll take a knife crime any day.
That's easy.
Well, there were
work.
like serious anti-immigrant riots this past summer in
Yeah.
London that were awful.
Well, that's kind of what's scary, is that again, like Tate is saying this, but also Musk is like retweeting everything. Like just like what it immediately made me think of was just all of the propaganda that the like Nazi party put out about Jews before all these pogroms. It's like these people are rapists. They're here to destroy like your community, job, family, whatever, blah blah blah. And like again saying just like, oh, this is like all they do is like mass rape and they're gonna take your women and blah blah blah. And just pointing toward vaguely brown, but also gesturing toward like an anti-Muslim sentiment because although Tate is allegedly Muslim, one of the things he's saying and like hammering is he's saying that Islam is incompatible with the UK.
Wait, what? How is he?
He's
Is he
saying
still saying that he's a
Islam-
convert? How is he
yeah.
squaring that?
He's just like, listen, I'm Muslim, whatever. I'm not saying anything against Islam, but he's saying it's just like it is incompatible with the West.
Okay, I never do this because I don't think it's appropriate, but I think we should just revoke his ability to say he's Muslim. It should be like, we do not recognize. Like, how can you say you're Muslim and then do that? That's crazy.
Yeah. And again, one thing, this guy, not a lot of people are talking about. He's just kind of still mostly known for being like an MMA fighter or kickboxer or something like that. Sean Strickland, another dumb guy that's on my radar that I'm like, this guy's gonna run for office in a couple years.
In the U.S. or the UK?
U.S. But he is a fucking idiot. But the only thing he ever talks about is just like how incompatible and like incapable of being assimilated Muslims are, and how all they do is crime and like jihad and like all this stuff. And
in the UK, I feel like it's a very different, fraught conversation because like so many Muslims are South Asian and there's just like former colonized colonial relationship.
mm-hmm.
But in the U.S., I truly don't like. I mean, that's still messed up to demonize people. But like in the U.S., like it's just like 2% of the population.
Yeah.
The idea that we could do anything is kind of like
Yep.
surprising, and it's such a diverse population too, from so many different backgrounds. It's like, what do you even mean? Like,
Yeah.
are you talking about like Bosnian Americans? Are you talking about like Egyptian Americans? Like, who are you talking about?
Just Muslims.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's almost become racialized to mean generically brown, like either South Asian or Arab. Like,
Yeah.
you're talking about like black Muslims, probably not. I don't know.
But you know, there you have it. So we'll keep an eye on that. Maybe there will be something worth talking about a little bit more as his campaign goes on.
Well, also, I think the MMA folks have like gotten a lot of power weirdly. Like, who's the name of that guy who like Trump is really close to?
Dana White.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to watch that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be worth just doing an episode on it at some point with someone
Yeah.
who knows
I'd be
more
curious to
about
learn
MMA.
about it.
But it's just the degree to which these guys are getting political power, like
So
Dana
strange.
White, Vince McMahon, like it's insane.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to, again, like a deficient culture that's created this like really hyper masculine, like violent man who feels like he needs to restore Western value by being like a violent, tough guy, because you have to, you know, it's another version of the Crusades. It's like if like people who had an opioid addiction and only like chewed tobacco were to do the Crusades today. This is how it would be done.
Yeah, I was thinking it's it's the rise of global fascism, which we are sadly living through. But yeah, it does feel like a kind of dumb version.
Yeah.
I don't know. Not that fascism should be glamorous, but it's like, oh, these guys really?
Yeah.
These are our renewers of Western civilization?
Yeah.
It's hard to get excited about that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe
It's
for
hard
you.
to even take it seriously.
Yeah. Yeah.
Damn, that's what the internet did. Watered down fascism.
Yeah. Okay. Last thing I have is I don't know if you saw this Columbia law professor who was kind of forced to retire early.
I did.
Thoughts on that?
No, really heartbreaking. She kind of advocated for students, not even Palestinian students, but, pro-Palestine supporters on campus, which is really needed at Columbia because they've just come under so much vitriol.
Can I say the thing that the anti-Semitic thing that she is alleged to have said came after one of the protests on campus where some Palestinian students and like some pro-Palestinian like protesters were attacked with some sort of chemical that people were saying was like skunk, which is a chemical that the IDF uses frequently to just go spray people in the streets. It smells really weird, and like the whatever the chemical is like sticks around for a while, and it like makes people nauseous, makes them very sick, and people have to get hospitalized. So someone hit some of the peaceful protesters on the campus with that, and then it was later found that the two guys who did it were tied to the IDF. They were grad students who, were tied to the IDF, and so this professor. What's her name? Kathy Frankel.
I was just looking that up. Actually, Catherine Frank. Yeah.
Catherine Frank. She was just like, oh, something to the effect of, we need to like better vet these students, or like people from the IDF like shouldn't necessarily like, we should scrutinize them a little bit more, I think was the effect of what she was saying.
And she's talking about specifically the IDF connection.
She was saying students who come to campus and like, or and are part of the IDF.
Right. So not even Israeli students, but specifically like actively IDF. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this professor also ran like within the law school ran the like LGBT law or advocacy center or something.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's really sweet.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it sucks that she was terminated.
She was forced to retire early. I'm sure she got the bag. You know what I'm saying? Like she ran a center. She was a tenured professor at the law school.
She's come out on record and said that she was effectively terminated. Yeah, that it wasn't her choice.
No. They forced her to resign. Yeah. But like I guess on paper, it wasn't like a terminate.
I see. Yeah, they just pushed her into early retirement.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, scary stuff, man. It's definitely very uneven.
Do you get a pension?
I don't think so.
No?
No.
If you retire from...
I don't think so.
Hmm.
I don't know how my benefits work.
Okay.
That's something that's come up on the podcast before that I need to explore.
All right.
I don't know how my medical benefits work. I don't know how much money is going to my 401k. I hope it's a lot. I think I tried to pick a lot.
Yeah, you checked the a lot box? Yeah. Okay, good. Then you're probably getting a lot.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
But no, I'm glad you brought that up. I saw that kind of news item.
You got to pay your student loans, by the way.
Yeah.
Make sure you do that.
Let's budget today.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I saw that come up and was really saddened to see that, and have seen students who have been supported by her just saying like how much of a loss it is.
Yeah. I don't have much to say about that other than, it does seem like they are very effective at like continuing to discipline everyone, right? Like although I feel like the protests have largely fallen off of the college campuses, all these institutions are still like aggressively pursuing everyone, and these groups like the ADL and Jewish Federation or whatever, like they're still like going after anyone who has criticized the state of Israel whatsoever. Like they are well funded and they are not letting up, because this is an ideological battle that they, don't want to lose.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like it's sort of meant to be almost like a warning shot too. I mean, like obviously it's not just a warning. It actually impacted this person's but I think it makes it less likely for other people to, advocate or to do the bare minimum in terms of protecting students.
Yeah. And they are still like across the board pushing these lawsuits, or like at Penn, I think Penn's having a lawsuit.
Yep.
It's bad.
Yep. And, as we said a million times, also really going after anti-Zionist Jews, which is crazy. And a lot of like rhetoric of like, oh, well, they're not really Jewish, which is like horrific. But yeah. One more news thing I wanted to mention before we get into the article, just I have nothing to say about this really, but our hearts go out to everyone impacted by the California fires. Really hard to watch from afar. I think selfishly part of the reason why it's hard to watch these climate disasters, I mean, of course, like you think of anyone you know, and of course it ends up being more people than you realize who have some kind of connection to this place.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the idea that it like is probably going to happen to you at some point. Like the way that things are going, like, it might not be a fire, but like some climate related thing on some selfish base level. It's just like, oof, like it's just kind of selfishly hard to feel like you're living in a planet that is becoming like less sustainable.
Yeah.
But I know that there's always like really beautiful stories of solidarity and people caring for each other, and just hope that people are able to find a way forward, whatever that looks like. Might not be in California, but
Yeah. I will say, actually, related to my last thing that I brought up is the really scary way that people are talking about these fires online is just that they're posting pictures of mostly Black or like immigrant poor people and just being like, I caught this person setting a fire.
oh my
And
God, dear Lord,
I
how
think
stupid.
I think vaguely they are trying to connect it with like this loose constellation of dots to because California has been this liberal bastion. They hate Gavin Newsom. They see the state as this
Though Gavin Newsom is not a great liberal, but yeah.
right. They see it as this failed state because immigrants are just everywhere and poverty's everywhere, and you have all these people in the streets who are addicted to drugs and blah blah blah, the homelessness crisis and like the housing crisis and all this stuff. And so they're trying to just, I think, get take this as an opportunity to one, make Gavin Newsom look bad, and two, also make it seem as if like all this destruction and chaos is being
Somehow
caused
by people of color.
by people of color and
Lol.
poor people,
Boy.
and who are also then taking the advantage of the situation to loot homes and all this stuff. And
That's so stupid. I mean, one thing that is kind of remarkable about the fire is like for a city that is as really divided as LA, like it just burned through the whole fucking thing. Like,
yeah, and it's probably trite to point out at this point that the damage is in the billions of dollars, like 50 or 60 billion dollars. And one of the last things that the Biden administration is doing before it leaves is giving Israel another $8 billion for bombs. I guess this, either the state of California or something like, or maybe LA, the city of LA, redirected, or not redirected. I think that's what people are saying, but like underfunded the fire departments, and then like probably overfunded the police departments.
Yeah.
And budgets are a zero-sum game. When you send money to one place, that's money that you don't get to send to another, and it's a declaration of priorities and what you think is important. And I think it's fair when people say it's like, oh, they funded the police department at the expense of another municipal service like the fire department's ability to act, and at the same time have been putting more money in the pockets of privately owned prisons to send slaves out to put out the fires.
Yeah, so a couple of things about that. I think the way that you put it as a zero-sum game is really well put, because initially there was some misreporting. Like, I don't know that there was necessarily a decrease in the fire budget between this year and last year. Apparently they were still renegotiating it, and that got slightly misreported in some circles. But the point still stands that like the police are ridiculously overfunded, and that all money that goes towards that, as opposed to going to when you're living in a place that is going to be on the front lines of climate disaster readiness and preparation and keeping your actual citizens safe. And then just to echo what you said, it is so disturbing that like a third of the firefighters are incarcerated and are getting paid like fractions of what the other firefighters are being paid. And also it's unclear if this will even still allow them a pathway towards becoming firefighters because of their criminal record after they hopefully are no longer incarcerated. It's like literally, and also creepily, California just voted to like not change the state of incarcerated labor last election. And so it's like a very real time consequence of that. Yeah, it's very dystopian. And the thing that's also so heartbreaking is like, I don't know, obviously it's not like they're interviewing everyone, but I have seen a couple of interviews with incarcerated firefighters, and they are so like eloquent and like, we're happy to serve our community. We want to serve our community. Like, we just want to be paid equally, which is like the bare minimum that you could ask for. Like, and they're not saying even like we don't want to be doing this, though it's unclear if they really have much choice. I mean, I guess some of them are volunteering, but it's like, yeah. What does it mean to volunteer if this is your only way to get paid, but you're still being paid fraction of what actual firefighters are being paid? It's just, the whole thing is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else to say about that?
No.
Okay. It's a hard pivot, but I have an article I'm really excited to talk about to finish us off that I keep on talking to Ahmed about. And so now I was like, I'm going to tell you about it on the podcast, and then we'll have to read about it together.
Yeah.
Okay. This is really not related to anything, so I'm not even going to try and connect it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of related to what we were talking about in the beginning, though, about like how things can linger in the body, even beyond memory.
Oh, with Nosferatu? Oh, no, Severance.
With Severance, right.
Oh, okay.
Going
but
back.
also Nosferatu.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's called Beyond the Pump, a narrative study exploring heart memory.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like a legit medical...
What is this website?
No, it's a medical journal. It's
What's
from PubMed Central.
PubMed. Okay.
I will say, I'm not going to lie, I don't really know like how medical journals work. I don't know if it's like a highly ranked one or whatever. I could tell you that better
PubMed
for like my own field. But is PubMed like the... I mean, I know it's kind of like JSTOR, right? Like that's not the name of the journal, is it? It's the name of the search engine, I think.
Right. I think PubMed is just like a collection of like published peer-reviewed stuff.
So, but it is peer-reviewed
available.
and it is published and it is available.
Right.
But I don't know these scientists obviously or whatever, but this is a legit thing. So, the field. I'm going to read from the abstract a little bit, and then I'll read from some of the findings. The field of organ transplantation, particularly heart transplantation, has brought to light interesting phenomena challenging traditional understandings of memory, identity, and consciousness. Studies indicate that heart transplant recipients may exhibit preferences, emotions, and memories resembling those of the donors, suggesting a form of memory storage within the transplanted organ. Isn't that crazy?
Okay, immediately, just a couple questions. How do you study this, right? If you're saying, oh, I didn't have these memories before, they must be the guy who died. And they're like, okay, well, let's ask the guy who died and whose heart you have.
Well, let me give you some examples.
Okay, yeah, give me some examples. Can you tell me, does it say which university or like who did the study and where it was published?
PubMed.
Okay.
No, so I don't know, it's a bunch of Muslim names actually, which is cool.
Uh-oh.
But I don't know where they're at or anything. I was going to say, I'm not like very literate in like, yeah, I mean, I've got their names, I've got their supervisors.
You're not very literate.
In like medical literature. Like, I don't really
okay,
know like how to tell you.
But you know how to read.
Yeah. I still can barely read. I got that going for me. Maybe we'll link it in the show notes, and if anyone is like a doctor, they can tell us more.
Okay.
So it begins with like a kind of interesting overview. So it has a bunch of medical stuff, obviously, but the stuff that I found interesting of talking about how in various cultures, including in a bunch of different like spiritual traditions, the heart is often regarded as a seat of emotions, desires, and wisdom. Mm-hmm. So the heart brain is sometimes referred to as like the little brain or the intrinsic nervous system. And then here are some examples of changes that people had when they got transplants.
Okay.
So food preferences. Changes in food preferences have been reported post-transplant, including both alterations in preferred food types and the quantity consumed. For instance, a 29-year-old woman who received a heart transplant from a 19-year-old vegetarian expressed aversion to meat post-surgery, previously being a frequent consumer of meat-based fast food. Similarly, a 47-year-old male recipient experienced nausea and a desire to vomit after meals following transplantation from a 14-year-old donor with irregular eating habits. Conversely, a 40-year-old female recipient developed a newfound taste for green peppers and chicken nuggets, foods previously disliked, after receiving her transplant from a donor who favored these items, even discovering a packet of chicken nuggets with the donor after his accident.
Even what? What was the last part?
After the donor had an accident, there was like chicken nuggets in their car.
Oh my God.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you more because I can tell you're skeptical, but I think it's really interesting.
That's so sad that the chicken nuggets were in the car. He didn't get to eat them. No. He died before he finished all of his chicken nuggets. Yeah, could you imagine?
It just shows how much he loves them.
Do you think he died in the car because he was reaching for the chicken nuggets and then like lost control of the car?
But it's sweet that like the person who has his heart now likes chicken nuggets, you know?
Yeah.
All right, musical preferences. A 45-year-old recipient started enjoying loud music, which is previously not a habit.
This is after a heart transplant.
These are all heart transplants.
All heart transplants.
Yeah. An 18-year-old girl who received a heart from a musician reported a newfound love for music post-transplant.
Okay.
Sexual preferences. This is really interesting.
A
male recipient of a heart from a lesbian artist reported heightened sexual desire towards women, suggesting a shift in his sexual orientation. So I guess he was gay previously.
Okay.
On the contrary, a lesbian recipient of a heterosexual woman's heart found herself attracted to men post-transplant, leading to confusion about her sexual identity.
Yeah.
These cases hint at potential changes in sexual orientation following heart transplantation, although the mechanisms behind such shifts remain unclear.
I feel like I'm floating around in that, like, in the Twilight Zone opening credits where it's just like the door and space, and I'm just swirling around in this like cosmic unknown. Oh my god.
I've been like obsessed with this idea.
A man
For some reason
used to hate chicken nuggets, but now he loves chicken nuggets. A woman who liked women now likes men. Whoa. Explain it.
I'm gonna read you a few more, then we can talk about it.
Hold on, I feel like I need you to put this like under your face, like we're telling a campfire story.
No, this is a medical article. Okay. Okay, also preferences in art, colors, and aversions have been noted post-transplant. A landscape artist's heart recipient develops an interest in art, while a dancer's heart recipient experiences a shift in color preferences towards cooler tones.
Oh.
That doesn't seem related to the dance, but okay.
Do you think anyone has become racist? You think
Oh, this one I thought was so crazy. Okay, emotional changes. Following heart transplantation, recipients reported two main types of emotional changes. First, some identity-specific emotions they believe originate from the donor. For instance, a 9-year-old boy described sensing sadness and fear from his 3-year-old donor, who drowned tragically. His mother revealed details of the donor's tumultuous family life, suggesting a suggestion between the donor's experiences and the recipient's perceived emotions. Second, recipients note alterations in temperament, attributing personality, traits of calmness, or emotional reactivity to the donor. And I won't read more because I don't want to just like read at you, but there's also a couple of people who really sweetly kind of like perceive themselves to be having a conversation with the donor.
Yeah.
Like internally, obviously, they're not like sitting walking around talking to themselves, but like, so some people are like taking on these characteristics, and other people are kind of like, oh, like just almost internally being like, thank you, like I appreciate it, and like kind of like acknowledging that piece of someone else that's within them. I don't know, I think all of this is so interesting. I mean, like, look, it's not like everyone who gets a heart transplant like takes on new characteristics.
Can I see your laptop?
Yeah. Are you gonna look at my article?
Yep.
You don't think my article's real?
Keep going.
But I think there's something beautiful that kind of makes sense to me. Okay, look, I have no medical background whatsoever. I'm not going to pretend that I do, but the idea that, like, why would everything be stored in the brain, right? Like, that there might be, like, memory or, like, maybe something beyond memory, just, like, imprints from our life experiences, or maybe even, like, intrinsic personality that is attached to other organs. I think that's so beautiful and kind of makes sense. I'm really in a random...
Whoa, these are a bunch of Saudi Arabians.
Yeah, they're all Muslim. I don't know why.
King Abdulaziz University, Imam Abdul Rahman bin Faisal University.
Oh, that doesn't make them less scientists, though.
Al-Baha University, Arabian Gulf University, Batarji Medical College in Jeddah.
Yeah.
King Khalid University.
Yeah. But it's like, you know, it's a real medical article. Anyway, what do you think about this concept? I think it's really beautiful.
My mind is blown.
This would be a good screenplay, actually, or a good.
No, this is a great premise for like a mid 2000s sitcom or TV show on Fox.
Okay, but do you feel like you have any memories that like live in your body? You know what I mean?
Yeah, the memories I formed.
You think it's all just your brain?
I haven't had a transplant.
No, I know, but even aside from that, I kind of feel like we have this very like brain-centric idea of like, okay, all of our experiences are in our brain. You know what I mean? But it kind of makes sense to me that like we would have experiences in other parts of our body. Like I think it goes back to a little bit of this
But what do you mean? Like okay. I had a surgery.
Yeah.
I have a metal implant in my C-spine.
Well, that doesn't have any memories.
I don't feel like a robot. You know what I'm saying? I'm not. I don't feel like I'm lacking anything less than what I had before.
I don't want to diminish your experiences, but I think this is different because you didn't have a transplant from like someone else.
But wouldn't that follow from what you're saying?
No, because it's just metal.
No. If you gain memories from having a different body part put in you, wouldn't you lose memory if you lost a part of your body?
No.
That's
not my reading of the article.
How it works. Okay.
No. I think it's like, okay, if you have a human. I mean, they're just talking about the heart, first of all, in this article.
Oh, I see.
So if you get a human heart from someone else, it has been impacted by being in that body. And then it could impact, in some ways, your body. or you could at least be aware of the presence of it being touched by someone else and then being inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is kind of going out on a limb, but I think it's like relevant. I feel like also we have this bifurcation in the US between like, or like really kind of like a legacy of like Enlightenment era thinking between like the rational higher self, which is tied in the brain, and then the body, which just has to be disciplined and like only is like a consequence of the brain's actions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's kind of beautiful to think about like, oh, like not only is there a clear bifurcation between like my spiritual self and my physical self, but that also like my spirituality or some kind of core essence of my being could reside in places other than my brain.
Well, sure. I that's like a thing that's just like, yeah, fine. That's possible. It makes me think of I think I mentioned this to you before, is that when a caterpillar undergoes, what is it, metamorphosis, and goes into like the little cocoon chrysalis thing, it actually melts like into like a soup, and then when it emerges as a butterfly, they've scientists who study this have found that they actually retain memories from their caterpillar stage, which would I guess support your thesis that memory and stuff can be held more deeply in DNA.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. That's a great example, yeah, of how like you could totally transform like your physical state.
Right.
I mean, and that's even like continuity within one being. Yeah. And I think the other thing that's sweet about this article, and like obviously these are just like kind of anecdotal patients talking about their experiences, is that it wasn't necessarily a negative thing. It's not like anti-heart transplant. It's just like, oh, like I've kind of acquired this like different dimension. If it is something as small as food preference or is something as large as like sexual orientation, I guess that might be like more confusing. But yeah.
Given that this was done in Saudi Arabia, what do you think? Do you think they were like, oh no, we missed our chance to execute this homosexual?
I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing that
What
if
would
they
happen?
want to publish internationally, they have to have certain
No,
scientific standards. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But do you think like what would happen if you're just like, there's got to be some catch up on the Islamic jurisprudence where they're like, what does it mean if someone is gay because they had a heart transplant now? You know what I'm saying?
I don't even know.
Or like,
yeah, it's a whole different like I don't know. Well, that also kind of like means it's not a choice, right?
What
that
does it mean for the soul?
And yeah, innate kind of. It's also confusing in a way that like it kind of disrupts the idea of us having a singular self too, right? Like if you can be so impacted by someone else,
yeah.
Like, are you just your own soul, or
do
like?
you think they'll handle it by being like no transplants?
I don't know.
Who does that? It's Mormons, right?
I think Jehovah's Witnesses don't do any kind
right.
of transplant. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe they were onto something.
They don't do blood transfusions
Right.
or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember what their reasoning is.
Probably this.
Yeah, I don't know if they knew about this, but I mean, I think also this article is making the argument that like it's the heart specifically that has like memory on some level. I don't know that like you could get like a foot transplant. Is that a thing? I don't know. What else can you get transplanted? I don't know if you could get a different kind of transplant and have the same kind of effect. Like the idea is
Kidney.
like, yeah, right. I'm not sure like if a kidney transplant would do something.
Why not?
But maybe. But I think the point here is that the heart like has some ability for something that seems to be.
They mentioned some other sorts of transplants,
Do they?
but whatever.
Okay,
yeah.
but the heart has some ability for something similar to memory. Like they talk about it being like a heart brain.
What about a lung?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, they're going to start transplanting more and more things.
They're already transplant lungs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's pretty cool. I think also it makes me think about like I've been seeing kind of conversation online and stuff about like talk therapy still being really important, but like kind of other therapeutic models that are more rooted in the body. And like even if you don't understand the root of everything, like intellectually kind of thinking about controlling and working with your somatic kind of responses.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's interesting too, like just treating the body more like it is an integrated part of the self and not like a side consequence, you know?
Yeah.
I like that.
I'm sad this came out. What year did this come out?
I don't know. I saw it on Twitter.
Probably after
first.
West Wing was off the air, because it would have been it'd be like the president got a transplant from the king of Kumar, and now he wants to do jihad.
Oh God, yeah, he
That would have been a
discovered a
great plot
preference
line.
for jihad.
Yeah.
2024, April 30th, so pretty recently.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's cutting edge stuff.
Yeah, it really is.
All right, I have to really go to the bathroom.
Okay.
Is there anything else?
I hope everyone takes care of their heart.
Yeah, don't let anyone else get it. Or...
You should.
Because then if you, how embarrassing is that? Like, okay, going back to my example, what if someone died? We had a really nice memorial for them. Be like, what a great person this was, whatever, blah, blah, blah. They even gave their heart to this, like, young boy who needed, like, a heart. And then the boy became racist. And then they're like, oh, my God, like, Jeff was racist this whole time.
Yeah.
And he just, like, kept it under wraps.
Except for the, like...
What a piece of shit.
Except for the...
We're glad he's dead.
Except for the sexual orientation thing, which is a little bit deeper, obviously. Most of them did seem to be more, like, foods or, like, kind of, like, sensory things that were, like, a little bit less deep, you know.
But you said the drowning
Music. Oh, that's true, actually. You're right. A fear of water after your organ transplant person had died from drowning. Are you an organ donor? I think I am. I would like to be if I'm not, but I'm pretty sure I already elected to be.
Mm-hmm.
Are you an organ donor?
These are my organs.
But for real though, like if you died, do you want me to give away your organs if I'm still
Give
alive?
away? What are you doing in a state? I don't think it's up to you to just be
it's
like.
Up to you, but I want to know what your wishes are. Like if you.
No,
were
I
to-
know, but even if it's not like you're the one giving them away.
But they sometimes ask your person, right?
I don't think so. I think if you're on the registry list, like.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not like you're just like, hey, I have this like heart and like lung.
Well, if I
and
die,
shit, I'm not using them anymore. So if you know anyone who wants them,
okay,
like
if
totally,
I die and you're
they're
still
for my dead husband.
and you're still around, I would like my internal organs to be donated, but not my eyes. And I still want to look nice, but like all my internal stuff can get donated.
You want to look nice?
Yeah, like I want
For what?
for death. I don't want to look bad.
But you're not gonna do like an open casket thing. What are you?
I know, but still, I just like, I don't know. I want to keep my eyes, but I'm down to like give like my heart and liver and kidney and stuff.
Okay.
So you know my preferences now.
I don't think that matters. I think if you're just like an organ donor, they just take whatever organs they need.
Really?
Yeah, you don't really get to sign up for I'm down for I'm down
I
for
thought you
liver,
could
but not
specify.
eyes.
Am I making that up?
No, I don't.
I think you can because I think some people who are doing open casket, which I wouldn't, but like some people who do that say that they still want to have like, they want basically their external self to still look recognizable to their loved ones.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that.
Yeah.
I just remember checking a box.
All right.
I don't remember getting to pick different body parts.
If someone got your heart, they would love chai. That'd be so cute.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. All right, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Bye.